Star Child, the little boy, after learning that his parents were the king and queen, the very people he had helped save his father, whom he had helped, and his mother, whose feet he had washed with his tears, was elevated to a high position by the riverbank. But just 3 years later, he passed away because the harsh trials of kingship proved too much for him to endure. Once upon a time, two poor woodcutters were traveling through a vast pine forest. Heading home, it was winter, and the night was bitterly cold. Snow covered the ground and the branches of the trees, and the frost relentlessly whipped against the branches, which creaked along the path. As they reached a waterfall, they noticed that it hung motionless in mid-air because the Snow King had kissed it. The cold was so intense that even the birds could not cope. Howling, howling, cried the old wolf, whose tail was wrapped between his legs as he shuffled past the bushes. This weather is dreadful. Why does not the government pay attention? Huh. Tweet, 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 chirped the green finch. Old Earth is dead, dead. They whispered among themselves, the birds' legs numb from the cold. The old Earth is about to marry. This is her wedding dress. They whispered. The birds were shivering but tried to maintain a romantic outlook on the situation. The old wolf growled, "That is nonsense. Let me tell you, it is all the government's fault. Understand, and if you do not believe me, I will eat you all." Understand. The old wolf was a very practical creature who never struggled to find a reasonable argument. "Enough," said the woodpecker, a born philosopher. "As for me, I do not need some atomic theory to explain this or that. The situation is what it is, and right now, it is terribly cold." Clearly, it was freezing. The little squirrels in the tall oaks rubbed their noses together to stay warm, while the wild rabbits huddled in their burrows, too afraid to even poke their heads out. The only creatures seeming to enjoy the cold were the big owls with horns on their heads. Their feathers were frozen stiff from the frost, but they did not care. They spun their yellow eyes around and hooted through the forest. Hoo, hoo, hoo. What beautiful weather. Hoo, hoo. The two woodcutters, wrapped up tight, trudged along, blowing into their fingers as their large boots left deep tracks in the snow. Sometimes they would fall into a deep ditch, and when they emerged, their bodies were covered in snow. Other times, they slipped on the icy patches where swampy waters had frozen, and they had to gather up their bundles of wood again. They thought they might have lost their way, feeling frightened and weak, knowing that the Snow Queen was ruthless to anyone caught in her cold grip. But they trusted Saint Martin, the patron saint of travelers, so they continued cautiously on their way. Finally, they reached the edge of the forest, and in the distance, they saw the faint glow of fire in the village. Their home. Overjoyed to have escaped danger, they laughed loudly. But as they approached the village, they grew quiet, reminded of their poverty. "How can we laugh like this?" one of them said. "We know that life is for the rich, not for people like us. We would be better off freezing to death in the forest, or being eaten by some wild animal." "That is right," the other agreed. "The world is divided by injustice, and nothing is distributed equally. Even suffering." Just as they were lamenting their fate, something strange happened. A star fell from the sky, streaking towards the horizon and seeming to disappear behind a clump of willows by a small sheepfold not far from where they stood. "See, whoever finds it will get a pot of gold." They cried, and eagerly rushed to where the star had fallen. One of them, quicker than the other, ran ahead, pushing through the willows. And sure enough, there was something shiny in the snow. He hurried towards it, bent down, and touched it only to find it was a cloak made of fine fabric embroidered with stars, rolled up in many layers. He shouted to his friend, "I found the gold from the sky." But when his friend arrived, they found, instead of gold, a sleeping child. One woodcutter turned to the other and said, "Is this our luck? We hoped for riches. But this is what we found. What uses a child to a poor man?" But the other woodcutter said, "We can leave the child here to die in the snow. I will take it home and care for it." He gently picked up the child, wrapped the cloak around it to protect it from the harsh cold, and carried it back to the village, much to his friend's amazement. At home, his wife opened the door and, seeing him return safely, embraced him and kissed him, then helped him unload the firewood and wipe the snow off his boots before urging him inside. The woodcutter said, "Look what I found in the forest. I am taking it home to care for." She gasped. "What is it?" She asked. "Our home is poor, and we are short of everything, and now you bring home a child. What are we supposed to do with it?" The woodcutter replied, "This is the star child." He explained to his wife how he found the child in the forest, but his wife remained angry and mocked him, saying, "We already have children of our own to care for, and now you have brought someone else's child into our home. Who will care for ours?" The woodcutter insisted, "The child was meant for us. We have to care for him." After a long pause, his wife softened and hugged the child. She placed the child in the small bed where their youngest was sleeping. From then on, the star child grew up with the woodcutter's children. Every year, he became more beautiful, with skin as white as ivory and hair like a crown of daffodils. His lips were as red as flowers, and his eyes sparkled like violets by a clear stream. But because of his beauty, he became arrogant, cruel, and selfish. He scorned the children of the woodcutter, considering them beneath him. He believed himself to be of noble birth, a descendant of stars, and treated the other children as servants. He showed no mercy to the poor, the blind, or the sick, even throwing stones at them and sending them away. The children of the village, though, were afraid of him and obeyed him, for he was beautiful and charming, able to dance, play the flute, and entertain them. He led them wherever he wanted, making them do as he pleased. One day, an old beggar woman came to the village. Her clothes were ragged, and her feet were bruised from walking on the rough road. She was exhausted, so she sat down under a tree to rest. When the star child saw her, he said to his friends, "Look, there is a stupid beggar sitting under that lovely green tree. Let us go and chase her away. She is ugly and unworthy." He walked over to her, threw stones at her, and mocked her. She looked at him with fear in her eyes but did not speak. The woodcutter, who was nearby, saw the star child's cruelty and rushed to reprimand him. "How can you be so cruel? What harm has this poor woman done to you?" The star child replied angrily, "What do you care? You are not my father, so you have no right to tell me what to do." The woodcutter answered, "I feel pity for you because I found you in the forest. You are ungrateful, and your cruelty will lead to your downfall." Hearing these words, the beggar woman fainted. The woodcutter carried her into his home, and his wife cared for her. When she regained consciousness, she asked, "You said you found the child in the forest, right? Is he now 10 years old?" "Yes," the woodcutter replied. "Can you show me the objects he had?" she asked. The woodcutter took the cloak and amber necklace from the chest and showed them to the woman. She burst into tears of joy and said, "This is my son. I lost him in the forest, and I have searched everywhere for him. Please, bring him to me." The woodcutter and his wife went to fetch the star child, saying, "Your mother is waiting for you." The star child ran inside, overjoyed, but when he saw the beggar woman, he mocked her. "Where's my mother? This beggar woman is the only one here. I do not want anything to do with her." The woman, heartbroken, said, "I am your mother, my son. I have searched the world for you." The star child, filled with disdain, responded, "You are just a beggar. I am a child of the stars, not your son." The beggar woman fell to her knees. weeping, her arms outstretched. But the star child turned away and went back to playing with his friends. Then, one day, the star child was banished from the village by his peers, who mocked and rejected him. He wandered far and wide, searching for his mother, but no one would help him. After 3 long years, he finally found her again, but by then, he had become so cruel that his fate was sealed. He had failed to recognize his true self and the value of love and compassion. His final trial came. He was crowned king but ruled for only 3 years before he died from the weight of his own arrogance. His successor ruled with cruelty and injustice. The Snow Queen and the Orphan Girl. Once upon a time, there was a woodcutter whose wife had passed away early, and he remarried. His stepmother had a daughter who was not only ugly but also lazy, spending her days eating and grooming herself. The stepmother, seeing that her husband's biological daughter was beautiful and well-behaved, grew envious. She forced the girl to do all the housework, and whenever she made even the slightest mistake, she would beat her mercilessly. Clean the house, and then go knead the dough. Do you hear me, you little brat? Don't forget to wash the laundry for me too. Good for nothing. One day, while the girl was sitting spinning thread by the well, she accidentally dropped the spindle into the water. Her stepmother gave her a severe beating and said, "You have to jump into the well and retrieve the spindle. If not, do not even think about showing your face here again." Seeing the deep, dark well, the girl was terrified. But, fearing another beating, she closed her eyes and jumped into the well. As soon as her feet touched the bottom, she opened her eyes in amazement. In front of her stood an incredibly magnificent castle. As she walked through the garden towards the castle, she came across an apple tree, heavily laden with ripe fruit. Seeing her, the apple tree cried out, "Pick my fruit." "Little girl, they are overripe." "All right, I will help you right now." Indeed, the fruits are ripe. With joy, she picked the apples and neatly stacked them into a pile under the tree. The tree shook its branches in thanks. Going into the castle's kitchen, she found many loaves of bread baking in the roaring fire. When the loaves saw her, they called out in a panic, "Take us out. Little girl, we are about to burn." "Don't worry. I will help you right away." She quickly removed the loaves from the oven and placed them on the table, extinguishing the flames. Moving to the living room, she saw a girl with hair as white as snow sitting on a soft mattress. She bowed and politely said, "Dear lady, I came here to find the spindle I dropped. If I do not find it, my stepmother will kick me out of the house." The girl with the white hair smiled. "Poor thing, I am the Snow Queen. Stay here and help me while I am away. When I return, I will return your spindle and reward you handsomely if you do your work well." The girl agreed to stay in the castle. Her daily task was to shake the soft mattress so that the snow would fall evenly. Being diligent, she did an excellent job. Moreover, she tidied up and cleaned the castle, making it spotless. After some time, the Snow Queen returned and was very pleased. "You have done well with everything I asked. You are a good girl. Moreover, you even took care of things I forgot to mention. As a reward, whenever you speak, a pleasant fragrance will emerge, and 2 roses and 2 gold coins will fall from your mouth." The Snow Queen also gave the girl a beautiful dress. She returned the spindle and told the girl to close her eyes. In an instant, the girl found herself standing at the familiar well near her house. At home, the stepmother thought the girl had died. When she saw her return, looking even more beautiful than before, she angrily shouted, "Where have you been? And where did you steal that lovely dress from?" Dear stepmother. As soon as the girl opened her mouth to say "Dear stepmother," 2 roses and 2 gold coins fell from her mouth. Much to the astonishment of the stepmother, a fragrant scent wafted around her. The stepmother immediately sweetened her tone. asking the girl what had happened to her. After hearing the full story, the stepmother ordered her own daughter to pretend to drop the spindle and jump into the well to look for it. The daughter obeyed and, as expected, she found the castle at the bottom of the well. She walked into the garden and encountered the apple tree laden with ripe fruits, swaying and crying out, "Pick my fruit." "Little girl, they are overripe." "Humph, I am not here to be your servant." The loaves of bread in the oven also called out frantically, "Take us out." "Little girl, we are burning." "Ha, I did not come here to do your dirty work." She also met the Snow Queen, who gave her tasks. But when the queen left, she immediately fell asleep. When she woke up, she grabbed the mattress and shook it, causing the snow to fly around. Then she fell back asleep. When she awoke again, she dreamed of speaking sweetly and releasing roses and gold coins. She thought about the gold and decided to speak as much as she could to get rich. How wonderful! She only took time to do the tasks given by the Snow Queen half-heartedly. When the Snow Queen returned, the lazy girl demanded her reward. "Please, give me gold coins for every word I speak. I have done my work for you. You are a rude, greedy, and lazy girl," said the Snow Queen. "You will be rewarded appropriately. Every time you speak, only toads and snakes will crawl out of your full mouth." From then on, the stepmother and her daughter had to hide deep in the forest. As for the good girl, she lived happily with her father. The Three Feathers. Once upon a time, there was a king who had 3 sons. The first 2 sons were clever and quick-witted, while the youngest son was quiet and slow-witted, so everyone called him the Fool. As the king grew old and realized he did not have much time left, he pondered over which of his 3 sons would inherit the throne. He then said to them, "Go and find the most beautiful smooth rug for your father. The one who brings it will be the next king after I pass away." To avoid any arguments between the sons, the king took them out to the palace and blew 3 feathers into the air, saying, "Wherever the feathers land, that is where you will go. One lands in the east, one in the west, and the last one falls close by. One son heads to the right, and the other to the left. Both of them mock the youngest, who stays with the 3rd feather." The fool sat sadly. Suddenly, he noticed a hatch next to the feather. He lifted the hatch and found stairs leading down. He descended and came upon a closed door. When he knocked, he heard a voice calling out, "Fat lady, and her dog, too. Come out and see who is waiting." The door slowly opened, and he saw a large, fat frog with a bunch of little frogs. The big frog asked what he wanted. He replied, "I want a beautiful smooth rug." The frog instructed one of the little frogs to bring a large box. The little frog brought the box, and the big frog opened it, taking out a smooth, beautiful rug. He had never seen such a finely woven rug before. He thanked the frogs and left. Meanwhile, the 2 older brothers thought the youngest was foolish and would not achieve anything. They figured there was no need to go through much trouble. They simply bought a rough rug from a shepherd and brought it back to present to the king. At the same time, the youngest returned with the beautiful rug. The king was surprised to see that the youngest had brought the most beautiful rug. He said, "As I said, this kingdom will belong to the youngest." The 2 older brothers, unwilling to accept, argued with the king, saying, "How can the fool be the king? He is so slow." The 2 brothers begged the king to set a new condition. The king agreed and said, "Whoever brings back the most beautiful ring will be the ruler of this kingdom." The king took the 3 sons out in front of the palace and blew 3 feathers into the air. The 2 brothers went to the east and west, following the directions of the feathers. The fool went straight to where the 3rd feather fell, where he found the hatch again. He descended and spoke to the big frog, telling him he needed the most beautiful ring. The frog instructed them to bring a box and opened it, presenting the most beautiful ring. The two older brothers secretly laughed at the fool for searching for a gold ring. They did not go far and just took a ring from the cart and brought it back to the king. When the youngest showed his ring to the king said, "This kingdom will belong to the youngest." The two older brothers were still dissatisfied, and they tortured the king with more reasons until the king finally agreed to set a third condition. The king said, "The kingdom will go to the one who brings the most beautiful bride." The king blew 3 feathers into the air again. This time, the feathers flew in 3 directions as before. The fool did not travel far. He went straight to the big frog and told him he needed to bring home the most beautiful bride. The frog responded, "A beautiful bride? How can we get her so quickly? But you will have her eventually." The frog handed him a hollow turnip and a carriage pulled by 6 mice. The fool looked at it and said, "What am I supposed to do with this?" The frog replied, "Just put one of the little frogs in the carriage." The fool did so, and suddenly, the little frog transformed into a stunningly beautiful woman. The turnip turned into a magnificent horse-drawn carriage, and the 6 mice turned into 6 beautiful horses. He kissed the beautiful woman and rode the carriage back to the palace to present her to the king. The 2 older brothers went straight to the village and chose a beautiful girl to present to the king. The king examined her and said, "After I'm gone, the youngest will inherit the throne." The 2 older brothers argued until the king grew frustrated and shouted, "It is impossible for the fool to be the king." The 2 brothers demanded that the 3 brides compete by jumping through a hoop suspended in the middle of the grand hall. They thought, "The 2 country girls are strong, so they should easily jump through the hoop. But the delicate girl will probably collapse when she tries." The king reluctantly agreed to the competition. The 2 country girls easily jumped through the hoop, but they both sprained their limbs. The delicate girl of the fool gracefully jumped through the hoop, light as a deer. The 2 brothers had nothing more to complain about. The youngest became the king and ruled the kingdom in peace and prosperity. Pulling up the turnip, once upon a time, there was an old man and an old woman, along with their granddaughter, who lived in a wooden house beside a lovely garden. In their home, there was also a dog, a cat, and a mouse. One day, the old man brought home a small turnip and planted it in the garden. He worked hard every day to tend to the plant. Before long, it grew into an enormous turnip, larger than anything they had ever seen. One morning, the old man went out to the garden to pull the turnip up for the old woman and the granddaughter. He tugged and tugged, but the turnip did not move. He called to the old woman. The old woman ran out and grabbed the old man's coat, while he continued pulling the turnip, but it still would not budge. The old woman called to the granddaughter. The granddaughter rushed over and tugged at the old woman's coat. The old woman grabbed the old man's coat, and he kept pulling the turnip, but it still did not move. The granddaughter called to the puppy. The puppy ran over and grabbed the granddaughter's hair. The granddaughter pulled at the old woman's coat. The old woman grabbed the old man's coat, and the old man pulled at the turnip, but it still would not come up. The puppy called to the kitten. The kitten ran over and bit the puppy's tail, while the puppy held onto the granddaughter's hair, and the granddaughter pulled at the old woman's coat. The old woman grabbed the old man's coat, and the old man kept pulling the turnip, but it still would not budge. The kitten called to the mouse. The mouse ran over and bit the kitten's tail, while the kitten bit the puppy's tail, and the puppy held onto the granddaughter's hair. The granddaughter pulled at the old woman's coat. The old woman grabbed the old man's coat, and the old man pulled at the turnip. 2, 3. Finally, the stubborn turnip was pulled out of the ground. Everyone cheered and danced around the turnip. Pull it up, pull it up. Oh wow, oh wow, it is out now. The Frog Prince. Once upon a time, there was a king who lived with his 3 daughters in a castle in a distant land. One day, as the king was pondering over his 3 daughters, He came up with an idea to find husbands for them. When the time came for the three princesses to marry, the king declared his plan. He said, "I will take 3 precious jewels to the spring in the middle of the village. The young men will meet there for 3 days. The one who finds a jewel will be the one to marry my daughter." The next day, the king picked 3 jewels, an emerald, a ruby, and a diamond, and took them to the village. The king walked around the young men with the 3 jewels in hand. First, he dropped the emerald, then the ruby, and finally the diamond. A handsome young man picked up the emerald. Then a wealthy prince discovered the ruby and bent down to pick it up. The king was delighted. However, a frog then hopped toward the diamond and picked it up. The frog brought the diamond to the king and said, "I am the frog prince. I wish to marry the 3rd princess." When the king told Tina, the 3rd princess, about the frog prince, she refused his proposal. The people in the village, upon hearing the news, laughed and mocked her. "Have you heard the news?" They whispered, "Princess Tina is about to marry a frog." Tina felt horrible. She cried, "I am the most unfortunate person in the world." The princess collapsed onto the floor and sobbed uncontrollably. She felt as if no one cared for her. She believed that her father did not understand her. Tina hid her pain from her friends and kept it buried in her heart. The princess sank deeper into sadness, feeling more miserable with each passing day. Her 2 sisters had grand weddings. The sound of wedding bells rang out joyfully throughout the village. Eventually, Tina left the castle. The princess ran away from the palace and lived independently in the forest. She ate frugally, drank from the spring, gathered firewood, washed clothes, swept the ground, slept, and took care of herself. Yet, the princess felt loneliness and deep sorrow. One day, Tina went for a swim. The lake was deep and cold. Tina swam for a long time and began to tire. She lost her composure as she swam toward the shore. In a hurry, she tried to swim to safety. Just as she was about to drown, the frog appeared and pulled her to shore with all his strength. The frog saved the princess. "Why did you save me, frog?" "Because, princess, you are still too young, and you need to live." "I cannot," the princess replied sadly. "I am the most miserable person in the universe." "Tell me about it," the frog prince encouraged. They began to talk. Tina and the frog prince sat together, hour after hour. The frog prince listened and understood. He shared with the princess about his own misfortune and loneliness. They both expressed their thoughts and feelings. Day after day, they grew closer to each other. They shared their stories, laughed, played, and worked together. One day, while they were sitting by the lake, Tina bent down and, with great emotion, kissed the frog on the forehead. Poof! Suddenly, the frog turned into a handsome young man. The prince picked Tina up in his arms and said, "Princess, you have turned me into a human with your kiss. On the outside, I was a frog, but you saw my true heart. I am free. A witch had turned me into a frog until I found love with a girl who loved me with her heart." When Tina saw beyond the exterior, she had found true love. Tina and the frog prince returned to the castle and married. The 2 older princesses were displeased. The handsome husband ignored his wife and did not speak to her. The wealthy husband laughed at his wife and ordered her around for the rest of her life. But Tina and her frog prince lived happily ever after, making the princess speak. Once upon a time, there was a princess, the daughter of a king, who was famous for her beauty. However, she had a unique characteristic. She was a woman of few words, often very tight-lipped. She only spoke when absolutely necessary, and rarely opened her mouth. When the princess reached the age of marriage, the king made an announcement that he would allow any man, regardless of his social status, whether from the village or the city, who could get his daughter to speak 3 sentences, to marry her. However, if he failed to do so in one day, he would be punished with 100 lashes and sent away. The king's announcement about finding a suitor for his daughter spread far and wide, and many young men, including several noblemen and princes, came to try their luck, but none succeeded. In the end, they all had to endure the painful punishment before leaving. Thus, it had been a long time, and the royal family still had not found a suitable husband for the princess. One day, a young man, poor and seemingly foolish, named Orphan, appeared at the gates of the palace and submitted his application. The palace guards, seeing his shabby appearance, almost refused to let him in. However, following the king's instructions, they reluctantly accepted him. According to the rule, Orphan was taken into the palace and placed outside the princess's chamber, where he was asked to carefully read the posted notice. He was then announced to the princess to prepare for his challenge. Meanwhile, officials had been appointed to observe and report on whether the princess spoke or not. On that morning, Orphan entered the courtyard, but instead of attempting to engage with the princess, he first began preparing his lunch. He asked to borrow a pot, some firewood, and rice, and he even searched for stones to set up a stove right next to the steps. However, the 2 stones he found were too small, and the pot kept tipping over. Each time the pot tipped, Orphan patiently adjusted the stones, but no matter how he arranged them, the pot remained unstable and kept threatening to fall over. Watching from the balcony, the princess, seeing the young man struggling with the stones, became irritated. In a moment when the pot was about to topple again, she shouted down, "Find another stone to balance it." Without saying a word, Orphan did as told, went to find a 3rd stone, and placed it. Finally, the pot was stable. After pouring the rice into the pot, Orphan began striking a flint. He struck it repeatedly, but without success. He was focusing on the stone above rather than the tinder, so although sparks flew, they did not catch. After trying again and failing, he did not adjust the position of the tinder, but continued working with the stone. The princess, seeing his frustration from above, grew impatient. After he had failed for the umpteenth time, she shouted down, "Place the tinder underneath." Orphan immediately followed her advice, and sure enough, the sparks caught the tinder and the fire started. Without a word of thanks to the princess, Orphan continued working. After cooking the rice and stew, Orphan prepared tea. The water boiled, and he needed to pour it into his small gourd. However, the spout of the gourd was narrow, and the kettle's opening was wide, so water spilled out with every attempt. He tried to adjust, but the water kept sloshing over the side. Seeing this, the princess, already frustrated, called down, "Place a chopstick in it." Orphan obeyed, and sure enough, the water flowed neatly into the gourd through the chopstick. At that moment, the official who had been observing the princess went to the king and reported, "Your Majesty, the princess has spoken to the young man 3 times. I have documented it." The king, surprised, ordered that Orphan be brought before him. When the king saw the young man, disheveled and unkempt, he was not pleased. However, considering how many men had failed to get his daughter to speak, the king thought this young man must have some extraordinary skill. After all, a king never goes back on his word. So the king decided to marry the princess to Orphan, the pig herd. Once upon a time, there was a prince who was very poor and owned a small piece of land. Though his kingdom was small, it was enough for him to search for a wife, and now he was looking for someone to spend his life with. The prince was eager to ask the empress' daughter, "Will you marry me?" He was confident in doing so, for his reputation was well known across the land, and hundreds of princesses would answer yes to his proposal. But this was the empress' daughter. Let me tell you the full story. At the empress' grave, a beautiful rosebush grew. The rose bloomed only once every 5 years, and it bore just one flower. But it was so fragrant that simply inhaling its scent could make one forget all their worries. The prince also had a nightingale that sang beautifully. Its sweet melodies filled the air. The emperor's daughter had heard about these two treasures and longed for both the rose and the nightingale. So the prince placed both of them into 2 silver chests and sent them as a gift to her. The emperor had the gifts brought before him in the grand hall, where the princess was entertaining her maids. Upon seeing the chests, she clapped her hands in joy and exclaimed, "How wonderful it would be to have a kitten!" But they brought out the rose first. The maids gasped. "How beautiful!" the emperor said. "Beautiful. It is beyond beautiful. It is magnificent." But the princess ran forward, smelled the flower, and sulked. "Father, it is a real flower, not a fake one." The sycophants chimed in. "Oh my, a real rose?" the emperor declared. "Let us see what is in the other chest first. Then you may decide whether to be upset or not." They opened the chest to reveal the nightingale. It sang its sweet, heavenly song, with no fault to be found. The maids said in their poor French, as they often did, "Charmant. Merveilleux. How charming. How wonderful." An old sycophant added, "This bird reminds me of the phonograph box that belonged to the late queen. So similar in tone and melody." "Exactly, exactly," the emperor cried, bursting into tears like a child. The princess said, "I can hate to believe this is a real nightingale." The people who had brought the bird hastily confirmed, "Yes, Your Highness, it is a real bird." "Then let it fly away." And she firmly refused to let the prince enter the palace. But the prince did not lose heart. He smeared his face with brown and black makeup, pulled his hat down over his eyes, pretended to limp, and entered, saying, "Your Majesty, may I humbly ask to serve in your palace?" "There are already too many people asking for work," the emperor said. "But I do need a pig herder. Can you do that?" The prince agreed to herd pigs. He was given a shabby room near the pigsty. He worked hard all day, and by the first evening, he had crafted a charming pot filled with music. Every time he placed it on the stove, it played a beautiful tune from old Germany. "Ach, du lieber Augustin. Alles ist weg, weg, weg. Dear Augustin. Everything is going well, well, well." But the most miraculous thing was that every time he stuck his finger into the steam rising from the pot, he could immediately smell every dish being cooked on every stove in the entire city. Certainly, this pot was far superior to a rose. The princess and all her maids walked by, heard the music, and stopped to listen. Enchanted, for she also knew how to play that tune. Ach, du lieber Augustin. But, truth be told, she only knew how to play that one part, and she played it clumsily. The princess exclaimed, "That is the tune I know. The pig herder is no fool after all. Let us go ask him how much his instrument is worth." One of the maids entered the pigsty, not forgetting to remove her shoes, and asked, "How much do you want for this pot?" "I will take 10 kisses from the princess." The maid gasped. "Goodness, not a penny less?" The princess asked. "What did he say?" The maid replied, "I do not dare repeat it. It is too much." "Whisper it to me then." The maid obeyed. "He is rude?" The princess exclaimed and walked away. She had not taken 10 steps when the music started again, sweet and clear. "Ach, du lieber Augustin. Alles ist weg, weg, weg. Go back and ask him if he will accept 10 kisses from my maids." The pig herder replied, "Thank you. 10 kisses from the princess, or you can keep the pot." The princess said, "Stubborn indeed. Fine. You stand around me, and do not let anyone see." The maids formed a circle and lifted their skirts. The pig herder received 10 kisses, and the princess got the pot. Everyone was delighted. The pot was taken out and played with all evening. No kitchen in the city could keep a secret anymore, from the palace guards to the cobblers. They all knew what everyone was cooking. The maids were so happy, clapping and dancing. "We know everything. Who will have soup with almonds or scrambled eggs? Who will have roast meat and milk porridge?" Amazing. Indeed, the palace inspector added. The princess instructed, "The most important thing is that no one should gossip, because I am the emperor's daughter." Understand? All the maids chorused. "God will keep our mouths shut." The pig herder, who was actually the prince everyone thought was just a pig herder, did not let a day go by without inventing something new. He carved a beautiful kreisel, a type of musical instrument made of wood with wooden rods, producing a sound when turned that played everything from a waltz to a gallop and even a polka, all kinds of dances. The princess passed by and exclaimed, "How wonderful! I have never heard such a beautiful tune before. Go ask him how much that thing is worth, but this time, I want to kiss him." The maid went in to ask and came out to report. This time, he asked for 100 kisses. The princess said, "Crazy," and walked away. But after walking less than 10 steps, the princess stopped and said, "We must encourage the arts. I am the emperor's daughter. Go tell him I will give him 10 kisses, and my maids will make up the rest." The maid hesitated. "Do you mean that rude ma'am?" The princess replied, "What is the matter with that? Even I can kiss him, let alone you, who are my servants, fed and paid by me." The maid went back into the pigsty. The pig herder firmly replied, 100 kisses from the princess, or take your pot and go." The princess ordered. "Surround me." The maids gathered in a circle, and the pig herder began kissing. The emperor was standing on the balcony, wondering, what is going on near the pigsty? He rubbed his eyes and put on his glasses. The maids are playing around. I must go see what they are doing. The emperor quickly went down the stairs. When he reached the courtyard, he sneaked up, but it was too late because the maids were too busy counting the kisses to notice the emperor approaching. He tiptoed and peeked in, shouting, "What is this?" He pulled off his shoes and rushed at the maids, beating them mercilessly. The pig herder was kissing the princess for the 86th time when the emperor, furious, yelled, "Get out!" So the pig herder and the princess were banished from the kingdom. It rained heavily. The princess burst into tears. She lamented, "How miserable I am! Why did not I just marry the charming prince?" The pig herder hid behind a tree, wiped the brown and black makeup off his face, took off his shabby clothes, and returned to the princess in his royal attire. He said, "I came here to tell you that I despise you. Princess, you did not want to love a sincere, kind prince. You did not appreciate the rose or the nightingale, but for something so trivial, you kissed a pig herder. Serves you right." He immediately returned to his country, locked the door behind him. The princess came to his door and sang, "Ach, du lieber Augustin, alles ist weg, weg, weg." But it had no effect. The prince did not open the door.